Welcome to Total Football Talk. I'm Anthony,
I'm Eric.
and we're going to go ahead and finish this up. There'll be about a week off because I'm going to be out of town, out of country, actually. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to answer the remaining three Forever questions, and we're going to talk about both one team from the NFC North and one team from the AFC North, and not in that particular order. Eric, anything you want to add before we jump in?
No, man, let's jump in feet first.
Okay, so real quick, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so you get my videos every time we upload them. I want to make sure that we keep that going. And I'm literally, the next time we come on, I'm going to be starting with the donations portion is almost all cleared up, and that'll help us get a better mic, get some merch, and get that out to you guys. So without further ado, Eric, let's jump right in.
All right, we have a few more Forever questions. And guys, I like this. Take it, put these questions online, what you guys want to talk about. If there's another team that you like to follow or whatnot, outside the Bears or Rams or Forever's Chargers, put it down there. We'll talk about the teams. That's what we're here for. However, one of his questions was, what is the greatest San Francisco 49ers team?
That's easy for me. Well, it's not what you think. Well, what do you think, Eric?
Honestly, I think what Joe Montana and the Niners did in 1981, before the arrival of a stud wide receiver, they still had a really good defense. But I don't think it was their greatest defense. But I think the 81 team was Montana's was the greatest 49er team in my opinion.
See, 13-3 is a really good year. And a lot of people are probably going to go, well, Anthony's probably going to go with the 84 team because they went 15-1. Actually, no, that 84 team got lucky on a few plays early on in the season. They really struggled against teams that were not very good as the year would wind down, like Detroit and even Minnesota. They blew them out, but they really struggled with a Redskin team that wasn't very good, showing that they were still not quite confident in themselves. They really only had one blowout the first half of the season, and naturally that came against the Rams, 33-0. But they kind of turned it on towards the end of the year and kind of became that team everyone thought. For me, it's so hard to repeat in the National Football League. When you look at how that 49er team in 89 played, they were the number one scoring offense. They had a top 5 defense. Ronnie Lott had a career year in tackles, had a career year in pass deflections. Don Griffin really showed how great he was. Roger Craig, even though he was running on his final set of legs, it was his last 1,000-yard season. Yeah, they had Jerry Rice, but John Taylor officially bursted onto the scene. Brent Jones became a superstar that year. They lost their number one defensive player in Chet Brooks with a broken neck against the New England Patriots. And they just didn't lose a beat. They went 14-2. One of their losses was a 13-12 last second loss to the Rams. And the other loss that they had was 21-17 to a Packer team that had surprised a lot of people. For me, it's the 49ers of 1989. That was the most complete team from special teams to coaching, not to mention they had just lost their head coach. So to do it with a rookie head coach to boot, Joe Montana's best year statistically, it's not even close, was in 1989. And for me, you have to take the rest of the league into consideration. Going into week 16 of the 1989 season, 17 teams were still alive for the playoffs. 17 heading into the final week of the season. And one of those teams, and the Niners already had home field advantage at that point. So they were just so much better than the rest of the league. And the rest of the league was really, really good. I mean, the Rams were probably the second best team in 1989. And to be honest with you, if I'm going to look at the talent on the field, the 49ers were infinitesimally better than the Los Angeles Rams in 89, and they proved it in the championship game. So, you know, I'd like to say the 84 49ers just because they went 15-1, but the 89 Niners blew a lot of teams out. They blew the teams out they were supposed to. They beat up on they beat the good teams. They only lost 2 games, one to the second best team in the National Football League, and another one to a team who finished with 10 wins and still didn't make the playoffs. So I got to go with the 49ers. of
Yeah,
'89.
As much as the offense was just ridiculous in '94, I mean, they scored at will in that year too. But I do like their '89 assessment. I just like the work that Montana did before the big names started coming, and with before Rice and whatnot. I mean, they still had a lot of whatnot. But when you're leading receiver who's Dwight Clark and you hit him in the back of the end zone on the catch, I mean, they didn't have no-name wide receivers. They just didn't have receivers that were going to jump out at you and grab your attention.
And they had no running back. I mean, their starting running back for most of the season was Bill Ring. And when you really look at the 49ers, I know you said their defense wasn't that great, but they had 4 rookies playing in the back end. The Niners in '81 were a great team, and I think that was probably Montana's finest performance as a quarterback as far as not having – I mean, let's face it. It was Joe Montana and Dwight Clark and Bill Walsh carrying the offense. But the defense, they did pick up Hacksaw Jim Reynolds. They did have some players on defense like Dean, the pass rushing specialist that they got, I believe, from San Diego. But for me, it was more of the 49ers and Bengals, who went 12-4 that year, kind of snuck up on people. The Niners weren't sneaking up on anybody in '89. Everyone knew how good they were, and to still play the way they did. I would probably say I agree with you in this sense that the '81 49er team was probably the most impressive considering the lack of talent that they had on the team to still pull off what they pulled off. But how much of that was a shock factor? How much of that was, we didn't see this coming? I mean, the next year, the 49ers didn't even make the playoffs. I think they won 3 games. So, in the strike-shortened '82 season.
Yeah, that was a strike-shortened season.
Right. But, I mean, that just tells you how far the 49ers were talent-wise. I mean, even Bill Walsh said the '81 team was way ahead of schedule, that really that he expected to win the championship in '83 or '84. So, and that's really when the talent started coming in. Anyway, what's the next question?
Next question is, did the San Diego Chargers at the time make the mistake on letting Drew Brees go?
Okay, so I'll take this one first. I believe they did. I don't think the 49er brass did a particularly good job of evaluating Drew Brees when they had him. I mean, think about what the Chargers could have done with that pick instead of drafting Phillip Rivers to make that football team even better. I have to go back and look at the draft and see who was drafted that year because the Chargers had a really high pick. They wouldn't have had to have drafted Phillip Rivers, which means somebody else would have had to have traded with the Giants. And would that other team have traded with the Giants? And who could the Chargers have gotten? Look, I liked when Drew Brees led that team to the playoffs. I know he hurt his shoulder, but when he led that team to the playoffs and they lost that playoff game, I believe that was the game that their kicker missed like 3 field goals against the Jets. Is that year? I believe it is.
Yeah, I think so.
How do you put that on Drew Brees? He got him in scoring range. I mean, the Chargers should have won that game big time. I thought at the time it was a mistake, and I still believe that was probably like the Rams trading Eric Dickerson in '87. I think that was the Rams' biggest blunder in franchise history as far as letting guys go that they already had possession of. I'm sure Ram fans out there who are older than me might have a better idea in mind. Like the firing of George Allen could certainly come into play, although I don't like getting rid of all their draft picks the way they did. But I just thought at the time it was a bad move because Drew Brees had proven, while he's an undersized quarterback, he was one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And how many Super Bowls would the Chargers have won, or at least gotten to, with Drew Brees versus Phillip Rivers?
I hear you. I have a little bit different take on this actually with Brees and Rivers, and the way I look at it is, did the Chargers let go of Brees too early? Yes. Granted, if the Chargers remember the Chargers drafted one, they drafted Eli, and Philip Rivers was drafted fourth. They could have drafted Larry Fitzgerald, number one, wide receiver, number one overall. There's really nobody else that stands out as a number one pick because Robert Gallery went second, Sean Taylor went fifth, Kellen Winslow went sixth, and Roy Williams to the Lions went seventh. There was really no standout player that I think could have went first overall. So the Chargers did what they needed to do, in my opinion. However, if the Chargers keep Brees, and Philip Rivers is never a Charger, I don't think that there's a face of the New Orleans franchise, and there might not be football in New Orleans anymore.
And maybe.
I think the state of the NFL actually takes a little bit of a turn, and there's no after Katrina hit. I don't think football comes back to New Orleans, but they had their quarterback, and they're like, well, we can rally behind Drew Brees, and Drew Brees and that Saints team was tremendous. They rallied the fans back into New Orleans. Do I think somebody else could have done it? Maybe, maybe not. We'll never know. I think the Chargers were stuck between a rock and a hard place. There was the whole contract negotiation, and there was also, we can let them go and draft another quarterback. It's tough to say because I don't know if Drew Brees wins a title in San Diego, and there still might actually be football in San Diego if that were the case. It's tough. It's a great question. It's tough to answer because there's a couple different routes you can take with what we know now about Brees. I mean, what happens if Brees signed with the Dolphins?
Yeah.
And they were instead of Dante Culpepper. Does Culpepper sign with the Saints?
No. Eric, here's why. Hold on. You do know. The Saints aren't going to sign Dante Culpepper because the Saints are still going to sign Sean Payton. Sean Payton's going to New Orleans. And does that then mean, did New Orleans then go, okay, we got our coach. Now he needs a quarterback. Let's go ahead and draft Philip Rivers. So is it possible that Philip Rivers is in New Orleans and Drew Brees is in San Diego? Because
definitely still possible, yes.
Right? So, but I have more confidence that Sean Payton would have turned that thing around in New Orleans. Would he have turned it around as quickly? Maybe not. Would he have won a Super Bowl? Probably not. Would he have gotten the Saints to be a competitive and exciting football team year in and year out like he's done? Absolutely. So, I mean, and they still had a really talented Reggie Bush in the backfield. So, there's a lot of opportunities there that the Saints could have made. I'm not going to sit there and stick a fork in New Orleans. So, they still have a good coach. That's where I would say, who knows where things are, but at the end of the day, I guess we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, great question. We need more of those. It really gets your brain thinking and how a draft might have been done if player A stays or player B leaves or whatnot. And who knows if another team's going to come up come through those ranks again, because
it's kind of like this, Eric. It's kind of like this. What if the Rams in '91 drafted Ricky Williams? For the '92 draft after the '91 season. What if the Rams did trade during the 1991 season? If they did trade, I think they were trying to send a package deal of not Gaston Green, but Cleveland Gary and a lineman to the Raiders for Marcus Allen. Would the Rams having Marcus Allen under John Robinson, would John Robinson have then stayed another year? Would the Rams have lost 10 games? Would the Rams have made the playoffs in 92 or 93? Because they were 6-10, but a lot of those games were close. And Robinson would have had his bell cow again. And would the Rams have left for St. Louis if they had made the playoffs in 93 or 94? Right? I mean, these snowball questions, these what-if questions, I love them because they give you a chance to kind of look and go, how would history have changed? Did you know, for example, that Joe Montana was deciding between the Los Angeles Rams, the Kansas City Chiefs, and I forget the other team. Ultimately, he ruled the Rams out because of their offensive line. But the Rams had courted him heavily, and he contemplated going to LA before Kansas City came into the picture. And then he narrowed it down to Kansas City and the other team. I want to say it was San Diego, but I can't remember. I know it was an AFC team. It was 2 AFC teams that he was deciding behind. But could you imagine if the Rams had Marcus Allen and Joe Montana in 92 or 93? It'd have been interesting. Huh?
Would have been a sick offense.
Well, yeah, because the Rams still had Flipper Anderson. The next year, which would have been Joe Montana's last year with the Rams, would have been Isaac Bruce's rookie year. So the Rams would have had Willie Flipper Anderson, Isaac Bruce, Marcus Allen, Joe Montana. Good Lord, that offense would have been a completely different football team than, Chris Chandler and Chris Miller with Cleveland Gary and I don't even remember. Jerome Bettis, I think the Rams got in 94. So, or 93. But anyway, that's fun to talk about. But what's the last question?
Last question is, it's kind of a two-parter. What one team would you take in all of history to face the 85 Bears?
That's really... What one team would I take? I only get it. Ooh, that's... You go first. I take the 85 Bears because I'm Eric.
Well, the second part of that question is, what one team would you take to face the 99 Rams?
Okay, so let's do the first one first, the 85 Bears. Who do you take? Because I have a team in mind.
As much as I want to shut your 99 Rams down and probably shut them out too.
Okay.
I want to see the 85 Bears versus the 94 Niners.
Yeah, see, for me, this is going to surprise you, okay? I mean, I want to say the Dolphins so bad because of Larry Zonka, Jim Kick, Warfield at wide receiver, a healthy Bob Greasy. That Dolphin defense was so unbelievable. But my God, I think the world, first of all, I think I would have an orgasm if I saw this particular matchup, okay? And I don't mean to be disgusting, but I'm serious. If I were able to see the 86 Giants against the 85 Bears, I think that would be better than sex. And I say that because both defenses were unbelievably ridiculous. At linebacker, they had wily veterans at the defensive line position. The Giants could run the ball. They could throw the ball with Phil Simms. Special teams is a split because Phil McConkey was a hell of a return man in 86, but their kick blocking team was even better. So, I look at that and I go, God, I would love to see that. But I'd have to say, I think the Bears would win that game. I think the difference in that game, because the weather wouldn't be a problem. Both teams could play in cold weather. But I just think that, I'm sorry, but in the 1980s, if given the opportunity, I would take Jim McMahon over Phil Simms pretty much every time. But I do think it would be a hell of a game to watch. And if I could pick one team in history, it would literally be the next year's Giants.
Interesting.
Isn't it? Because you'd think, I really was thinking about the 89 Niners, but, because everything, from a sheer, so let me answer this question in two parts. Which team would I most like to see play the Bears? I just told you the Giants, and for those reasons. What team would I take to beat the 85 Bears? I would probably have to say either the 83 Redskins, but I would probably say no because they lost the Super Bowl and they showed that they were vulnerable. I'd have to go with the 89 Niners. No two teams had a better postseason run than the 85 Bears and the 89 49ers as far as point differential and defense. So if I'm going to beat the Bears, give me the 89 Niners. As far as sheer enjoyment of watching a good football game, give me the 86 Giants. Your go. You already said, I think. Who did you say?
I said the 94 49ers.
That's right.
But I'll tell you this much. As much as that would be a great game, I'll tell you, I'd rather end the Dolphins' 72-game winning streak. 1972, their perfect season.
Yeah, their 17-game win streak. Okay, what team would I take to face the 99 Rams? That team was so tough because, first of all, who their head coach was. He had no problem telling Mike Martz to abandon the pass and go to the run if the running game was there. That is probably one of the more complete teams in NFL history. And I think the 85 Bears would have a really hard time matching up with all of those weapons. Folk out of the backfield would torch Mike Singletary or Wilbur Marshall, whoever didn't rush. Kurt Warner would step in that pocket no matter who was bearing down on him. And that Rams offensive line had 3 Hall of Famers on it, or 3 potential Hall of Famers on it. I think for that particular team, you'd have to go, and this is going to surprise you, I think, you'd have to go with the 83 Los Angeles Raiders, and here's why. You had 2 Hall of Fame corners, so you could single up Bruce and Holt. You had a really good safety in Van Elroy who could at least cover long enough to give Oz Hakeem some fits. And then you've got a front 4 that can put pressure on the quarterback, especially Howie Long and Lyle Alzado. And the Raiders' offense was nothing to snicker at. So I would probably say the 83 Raiders would be the best option to match up and beat the Rams. Now, as far as a great game, I think that one's pretty easy. I'd want to see the 83 Redskins just because both offenses were so prolific. You want a 72-71 final, there you go. Although Darryl Green could have easily shut down Isaac Bruce, or not easily, but could have done it. But I think that could have been a high-scoring, fun game to watch. Joe Washington out of the backfield versus Marshall Faulk. Joe Theismann against Kurt Warner. 2 quarterbacks that were pretty much cast-offs until they got their opportunity. Great offensive lines, good defense. I mean, that'd be a fun game to watch. I think the Rams would win that one, but I think it would be a fun game to watch. But if I'm going to beat that 99 team, I'm going to take the 83 Raiders.
I think for me, for pure football enjoyment, and whether or not whoever comes out on top, I think if you play 100 times with these 2 teams, that it would be split straight down the middle. And for me, I think the ultimate matchup with the 99 Rams with that offense, and a lot of people forget about their defense, but they still had a really good defense too.
They were number 1 in defensive points, defensive scoring.
Right. And the team that I'm about to name was, I think, had their best defense this year, but their offense was still no joke. And that's the 78 Steelers.
Yeah, they were 14-2 too. And oh man, that's a good game. You're right. Look, the reason I think we're both not saying, oh, for sure, and I'm going to let you finish this thought, but I think you'll agree, the reason we're not picking the 2000 Ravens in any of these equations is their offense was just too pathetic. Right. Okay.
Yep.
Go
Absolutely.
ahead. Continue with this Steeler concept because this would be a hell of a game.
Yeah, I just like the fact that you have 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. You have Franco Harris versus Marshall Faulk. I mean, they're not going against each other, obviously, but their defense. The offensive lines were still great. The wide receivers were still amazing. The only difference between the 2 teams is eras. That's it.
Is who? Yeah.
Is eras. Is the eras that they play. Because if you had that Steelers team in '99, could you imagine? Like, that would probably be the greatest Super Bowl ever.
Oh, yeah. And that's when they were still playing defense. I mean, for me, the 2001 season was really the last year that the NFL was truly great. They made a couple of rule change after that, which I wasn't a fan of. But yeah, I agree. I think that would have been amazing. It's funny that we didn't put the 99 Rams against the 85 Bears.
I know.
And I think for me, it would depend where they had to play. I mean, the Rams went into a bad Philadelphia team in the cold in Philly and lost. Now, granted, they benched their starters, but their defense, well, I mean, that's the other game that they lost at Tennessee, which was a little bit cooler weather, but still it was nice weather. It was fall. And then their other loss was to the Lions in the Dome. I don't know if the weather would have affected that Ram team as much, but we don't know because they never really played in weather conditions that year.
Yeah, and who knows how the surface in the TWA Dome would have affected the 85 Bears defense too.
Yeah. Would that have made them faster?
Granted, they played on artificial turf outside those years, okay? But, inside, no weather affecting them, pumped-in crowd noise or whatnot, especially when the Rams are on defense. Like, you don't know how that would play out.
No. And you imagine Walter Payton on some of that newer turf in the 90s?
Oof.
And Willie Gault. My God, who's going to cover Willie Gault? You're going to have to bracket cover him. And that was the bad thing about the Bears is you could bracket cover Willie Gault, and the rest of the guys, the Rams could single up. So you'd have to. I mean, I think that game would be lower scoring than people think. I'm gonna go with a fourth part of this question here. You're gonna be probably upset with me, Eric, on this, but I do believe if you take into consideration the Rams' defensive talent and superstars like Grant Wistrom and the Bears' offensive firepower, as good as it was that year, they lacked in certain areas. I think the Rams would probably win that thing 20-17.
Well, I'm going to give you this. The Rams already had the blueprint to stop the Bears, and that was watching the Patriots bottle up Walter Payton.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you going to stop the pass or are you going to stop the run? If you're going to stop the run, that's fine. I mean, we've seen Payton get shut down. But the Bears' offense was still able to move the ball. They had a very underrated offensive line, obviously led by a Hall of Fame center.
Didn't you have three Hall of... I mean, Jim Covert, you had Hilgenberg.
Covert's not in.
Why isn't Covert in?
I'm double-checking on this.
I think Covert was still your lineman. You had three really good offensive linemen that you drafted from 82 to 83. Was a hell of a draft for you guys. I know you got two of your three top linemen that year, offensive linemen. And Covert, I'm pretty sure, was one of them. But
he's actually not in.
Who's your line?
Hildenberg, Colbert. I'm actually bringing up. It's why Jim Colbert deserves far greater Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I told you Covert was in. Why'd you say Covert's not in?
Why Jim Colbert deserves far greater.
Oh, Hall of Fame. No, I wasn't talking Hall of... Well, I agree. He should be in the Hall of Fame. But I'm talking about just... He was on your offensive line, though. Yeah, you're right. He should be in the Hall of Fame. That's absolutely ridiculous. I think linemen have the most ridiculous restrictions in making the Hall of Fame. And it's also the hardest to figure out. Because you got a guy like Hannah for the Patriots that's in... who was never on a really good team, or had very few good teams that he was on. And then you've got a guy like Covert, who was on perennial powerhouses and led the league in rushing and won a Super Bowl, and the guy can't get in. It's there's just too much inconsistency there. Is that it on the questions, E, or is there one more?
No, that was it.
Okay. So let's go ahead and jump right in to our predictions. I'm going to ask you to choose NFC North or AFC North. Which one are we going to cover first?
AFC North.
Okay. So, as many of you guys may know or may not know, Andy Dalton is my favorite player in the National Football League. That may come as a surprise to some of you. Others of you may turn around and be like, yeah, we know, Anthony, you're an idiot. Um, um, the reason I like Andy Dalton is to take a franchise like Cincinnati to the playoffs as many times as he is as a fan of a team that has gone long durations without making the playoffs. Just getting there is hard enough to do, and you can't get there without a really solid quarterback. Now, granted, the Ravens proved that theory wrong, but the Ravens are the exception, not the rule. When you look at the Bengals' postseason losses, one of them, Andy Dalton wasn't even playing in. Another one, Andy Dalton had like a 112 quarterback rating, but the defense still gave up too many points. Another one, he had drop passes by wide receivers with balls on the money. You can't, it kills me when people put all of the blame on Andy Dalton for losing those games, but yet Peyton Manning gets none of the blame when the Colts lost. And there was a game the Colts lost 41-0 in the playoffs. Andy Dalton's never lost by that margin ever in the postseason. I'm sorry. So it takes more than a quarterback to win a playoff game, but sometimes you just need a quarterback to get you into the playoffs. So I'm high on Andy Dalton because I think he's really underrated, and I think he's a really accurate quarterback. And for me, the number one thing I like in a quarterback is accuracy. That's why I love Jared Goff. I like an accurate quarterback. Now, I look at Cincinnati and I go, defensively, I think they got better through subtraction. Vontaze Burfict is gone. Iguodala is gone. Who's the other one I saw? Not Vincent Ray. The defensive tackle, Adolphus Washington is gone. I know he was a backup, but he didn't really do much. If you watch Bengal games from last year, when he came in, there was no pass rush. So they're able to get rid of that and kind of free up some room. And then you look at, I do think losing Michael Johnson is one of those things that, it hurts just for, keeping people off of Geno Atkins. But I love the addition of Kerry Wynn and BW Webb because I think it brings depth to an otherwise lacking depth, a football team that lacks depth, especially on defense. But Joe Mixon, I'm not a fan of John Ross, but Billy Price is a good center. They got this kid, Jonah Williams, who I think is the best offensive lineman, not even close in this draft, to play left tackle, who I think is going to start immediately. And if you don't think a left tackle can make an impact on a football team's performance from the word go and can do it as a rookie, then A, you haven't been watching football, and B, I only have one name to say, and it's Whitworth. So you absolutely can come in and make an impact at that position. So for me, Andy Dalton's blind side is protected. He's got a quarterback on the offensive line who's now got 2 years, will have 2 years under his belt when this season wraps up, in Billy Price. And defensively, they still have Geno Atkins. They still have William Jackson III. I still like Dre Kirkpatrick. Sean Williams is still a really good safety, so I think their back end is secure. I think their linebackers got better through, like I said, through subtraction. Nick Vigil is going to have to step up, or Vigil, or whatever you want to call him. But to me, my concern with the Bengals is three positions. Defensive line, outside of Geno Atkins, tight end, and wide receiver. AJ Green's getting up there in age. John Ross has not been the guy that everyone wanted him to be or expected him to be, and Tyler Eifert is an injury-producing machine. So somebody else at the wide receiver position is going to have to step up for Cincinnati. But if they are smart, they're going to lean on Joe Mixon. And in a conference like the AFC, if you can run the football consistently, even on third and medium situations, you're going to wear down defenses because none of these defenses are good at tackling. And you're in a division where your only real competition in 2019 is the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, I said it. I don't think the Ravens are going to be anything good this year. I think they're going to be even worse defensively than because they were pretty good last year. But again, the Bengals, if they're going to come out throwing the ball 30 times a game, I don't care who your quarterback is, you're not going to win. But if they lean on Joe Mixon, I think the Bengals have some real potential to win some football games. I'll do my prediction on the Bengals in a minute, but I want Eric because I know you don't agree with me on Cincinnati. You actually think they're going to be the worst team in the division, but I don't see it. But go.
Yeah, with rookie head coach Zach Taylor, who used to be at the Rams. He used to be the quarterback's coach, so he likes to already throw the ball, and he's going to be very quarterback friendly. So he's going to give Andy Dalton a lot of opportunities to succeed, as he should. Okay. However, here's been the Bengals' problem the last few years: injuries, injuries, injuries. Yes, you could say that about every other team in the league, but I mean they get injuries at their most prominent positions. AJ Green's been injured. He's only played in 35 games since the start of the 2016 season. He missed quite a few chunks of games. And the Bengals really didn't do much to add in from free agency. They re-signed a lot of their own, and then they had what I thought was a really good draft. I thought they got one of the steals in the draft in the sixth round. Running back Travion Williams from Texas A&M. He dropped, and the Bengals were like, "Hey, we're going to scoop him up, and we're going to install him in our offense." I want to see Joe Mixon play 15, 16 games. I want him to prove it that he can play football in the NFL. We already know he can play, but I want to see him sustain production over a year span, maybe even a 2-year span. Because that's what they need out of Joe Mixon. They need him to be the bell cow. If he's injured on the sidelines, he can't do that. Then the Bengals become pretty one-dimensional, even with Giovanni Bernard and Travion Williams back there. But what they really need, and I know you're not a big fan of John Ross, but they need Tyler Boyd and John Ross to step up big time. Tyler Boyd's the other wide receiver that I think you may have forgot to mention, but he's one who could be an outside threat on the opposite side of A.J. Green. Now, what they also did, they went out and drafted a tight end from Washington, Drew Sample, who could easily get a ton of playing time depending on how Eifert and C.J. Uzoma pan out. Now, what they're doing with Eifert is this. They're spreading him out, putting him in the slot so he doesn't have to block. He's been getting injured a lot on blocking the last few years. They're going to relieve that blocking from him, and he's going to go out as a receiver this year, which I think is smart on his part because, man, he is a big red zone weapon. And if you can get in the red zone, you got Green, you got Eifert, you got Boyd, you got Mixon, you got Bernard, you got 5 different opportunities to get in that end zone with 5 different players. I like it. And Dalton is known for making good decisions, okay? Like, he's not out there just throwing balls up in the air or whatever. He makes good decisions. When he has the guys injured, that's when he's more susceptible than any other time in his career when he doesn't have A.J. Green on the field, that he's going to throw those picks, and some of those picks come at inopportune times. Now, here's the problem. I'm glad you brought him up as they're picking in the first round, but Jonah Williams is there to anchor the offensive line. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen until 2020 because he is out with shoulder surgery for the year.
Ooh. So when did that happen?
A month or 2 ago.
Yeah, see, I've been watching the OTAs and stuff like that.
So, to me, it's not, okay, it's a big loss on paper, but it's not a big loss in the field because, A, he hasn't played a snap in the NFL yet. It's not like he was a two-year starter already, and they're already missing that offensive line. They're just going to get one of their offensive linemen who was there last year, plug in that spot. Now, is it going to be as effective with not as big as the body as Jonah Williams in it? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, he's 6'5", 300. So, I mean, that's a big body to move and to get around. But here's what else I'm seeing from the Bengals and why I don't think they're going to succeed in the AFC North this year. 4 of their first 6 games are on the road. At Seattle, at Buffalo, at Pittsburgh, at Baltimore. Now, if they could legitimately go 3-1 in that, I would rethink the Bengals where they would be in the stand.
It's so funny that you say that. It's so funny that you say that.
Road schedule. Hold on.
Ahead.
I don't like their road schedule. Their home schedule in the first half of the season: San Francisco, Arizona, Jacksonville. Those are 3 winnable games. But after Jacksonville, they go to London to play the Rams, and that concludes their first half of the schedule. If they come out 4-4, I think they're smelling roses.
Yeah.
If they're anything less than 4-4, then it's going to be a tough second half stretch. Because even though their second half of the schedule is so home friendly, and they get a lot of great matchups at home. I don't know if they can overcome a slow start.
So I agree with you. I totally agree with you because I actually look at the back half of their schedule and I think that's the harder schedule. First of all, I didn't mention Tyler Boyd because Tyler Boyd is set. He's a stud. He's proven to be a star. You don't have to worry about him. The Bengals, Carlos Dunlap, for me, I mentioned the D-line being a weakness and not a lot of help for Geno because Carlos Dunlap has a history of taking plays off. And they need him to show up every down to help Geno Atkins. Now, Carl Lawson comes back from an injury. That's going to be interesting to see if he can build off his rookie year. I agree with you on the weapons. And it's so interesting that you said the Bengals' first 4 games are really going to be the telltale sign, or the first 6 games and how they play. Here's what I see, okay? I think Seattle is highly overrated, and they have, who's Russell Wilson going to throw the ball to? Yeah, right? Their running game, is anyone really afraid of their running game? Do you really believe the Seahawks are going to repeat last year? Because I know I don't. I look at that game and I go, at Seattle, afternoon game, week 1, that's a W. Home against San Francisco, that's a W. At Buffalo, I think is going to be a loss. I think that's going to be a tough one. Then they come home, or then they go to Pittsburgh on Monday night. And I'm sorry, but I think the Steelers are the worst team in the AFC North this year. I think the Bengals actually split with Pittsburgh, but they win this one on the road because I think Pittsburgh's going to be reeling after the first 3 weeks of the season. Then they come home to play Arizona. I think that's a win. Then they play at Baltimore, okay, and I have that as their second loss. Then I have them beating Jacksonville and beating the Rams. So they're 6-2 at the halfway point. So there's your hot start. Now, the second half, it gets...
That's funny. I got them at 3-5.
See? So there you go. Then you look at their second half of their season, and I'm like, okay, Baltimore, that's a win. At Oakland, that's a win. So now they're 8-2. I think they'll lose at home against Pittsburgh. I think they'll beat the Jets. I think they'll lose at Cleveland. I think they'll lose at home against New England. Okay? And then I think they can beat Miami, although for me that's a swing game. In Cleveland at home, I think they're going to have to win if they don't beat Miami. I could see them going 10-6 or 11-5. I really could. So...
I'm sorry. I see 3 winnable games in the second half of their season. So I'm making on them 6-10.
Yeah, you am doing the same record. Well, again, it's going to depend for me if they run the ball. Now, I'm reading the scouting report on the Bengals, and they say that Zach Taylor had said that Joe Mixon looked for him to lead the league in touches this year. So if they do that, I think the Bengals have a better than average chance of winning, and I think they are the most underrated, most overlooked team in the AFC, next to maybe Buffalo. All right, I want to switch gears and talk about another another North team, but this time we're going to go to the NFC North. Now, Eric, I started with the Bengals. This is your cup of tea. This is your division. You go ahead and you start this one.
Yeah, the Detroit Lions are going to be a very interesting team this year. Matt Stafford actually played with a slightly broken back last year, and you wouldn't have known it. It's like Aaron Rodgers last year after week 1 played with a little bit of a fractured tibia. You wouldn't know it by the way he was still throwing the ball and moving around back there. So we already know NFC North quarterbacks, at least 2 of them that I know of, are pretty tough and want to play out there. The jury's still out at Cousins and Trubisky. However, the Lions are an interesting team going into 2019. And second-year head coach Matt Patricia, former defensive coordinator in New England, is really asking for a lot more players on defense. He says he wants to go with a more consistent offense as far as running the ball. I want to run the ball. I want to run the ball. I want to run the ball. A lot of head coaches say that. Well, what kind of NFL is this? It's a passing league, okay? And who you have a multi-million-dollar quarterback in Matt Stafford. You're not going to hand the ball off with Matt Stafford. However, they drafted last year a guy named Kerryon Johnson from Auburn. And Kerryon Johnson had 970 yards. The Lions went, I want to say, 5-6 years without a 100-yard rusher, and Kerryon Johnson finally broke that trend. They haven't had a 1,000-yard rusher in quite some time either. He was 30 yards away. So knowing that Patricia wants to have a balanced offense, and if Kerryon Johnson can stay healthy, he's easily going to surpass the 1,000-yard mark. Now, they also signed C.J. Anderson in the offseason to back up Kerryon Johnson. Expect C.J. Anderson to get a lot of goal line work, a lot of red zone work. And they also still have Theo Riddick, who is their pass-catching back on third down. He'll see a lot of playing time. So they have a semi-three-headed monster, in my opinion. But I still think Kerryon Johnson is going to lead that backfield and eventually take over, maybe even pass-catching duties on third down or when he needs a breather. Their wide receivers, they traded Golden Tate during the season, and they got Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, and they also signed Danny Amendola in free agency as well. I don't know how much he's going to give after being outcasted by the Dolphins, but Galladay has a lot of room to grow. I think he's still going to be a great wide receiver in this league. Marvin Jones, he exploded 2 years ago. I thought he was, he just couldn't sustain the touchdown catches that he had going for him. Here's where it gets interesting. They signed Jesse James away from the Pittsburgh Steelers to be their number 2 tight end because they drafted T.J. Hawkinson in the first round, a tight end from Iowa. If you watch any Big Ten football, then just watch the tight ends. Because those are the guys who catch all the passes. And Iowa loved to go down the field to Hawkinson last year. But here's what I really, really liked about the Lions. Coming from a Bears fan in the NFC North, you're not really supposed to like anything about any other team in your division, but the Lions are going to become more balanced, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I think Patricia's going to get his way, get those defensive players that he wants. He is getting more players in free agency to protect Matt Stafford. So, if you can keep Stafford upright, you have a great chance. Now, the Lions, with their first half of the schedule, they get a bye week in week 5. And they start at Arizona, which to me is a win. They're home against the Chargers, at Philly, and then home against Kansas City. So 2 home games, 2 road games. I think it's easy for them to go 2-2 or even 3-1. Okay, I think they can beat Philly. It's not later in the season. It's not in the cold. Although the Lions, they've been going to Green Bay the last 2 years and beating the Packers. So anything's possible with them. It's when they come out of the bye week, they got 2 straight division games, and they're home 3 out of 6 weeks. And then comes the balance of the schedule where, starting with Thanksgiving, they're home against the Bears, at Minnesota, home against Tampa, at Denver, home against Green Bay. To me, this Lions team, if they were in any other division, I would tap the Lions as walking away with the division. I just think that there's 1 or maybe 2 better teams than the Lions in the division. And I think that they're also going to have a hard time scoring against some of the teams with the better defense. I think the game against Kansas City right before the bye week is going to be shootout. I can see a 42-38 game easily. Mm-hmm. And whoever has the 1 lone turnover is gonna win the game. They don't have the easiest schedule. I mean, they get the AFC West and the NFC East. So we all know the NFC East can be a tough gauntlet to go through at times, and this may be one of them with Dallas and Philly. But luckily, they get Philly early. They get Dallas 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. So who knows? I mean, the Lions could surprise, go 10-6. The Lions could also surprise and go 6-10. But I think somewhere between 7 and 9 wins. And honestly, I think the worst team in the NFC North could be 8-8.
Yeah, the AFC North is going to be, and I think the NFC East is going to be a very interesting division. 2 divisions in the NFC to watch. I think a lot of people are talking highly of the West, and I chuckle, only because I don't think the Seahawks are going to be over 500. I don't think the 49ers are going to be over 500. I know the Cardinals aren't going to be over 500. The Rams are going to be what you call a paper tiger going into the playoffs with their offensive line issues. but they'll certainly look better statistically than maybe they actually are because of their division, where I think the Bears are going to look weaker than they actually are, as will the winner of the AFC East or NFC East, due to the toughness of those divisions. Look, to go back to what I said about Andy Dalton, there's a little bit more proof here in what I'm saying. You talk about ridiculousness and lack of ability to evaluate talent. For somebody to sit here and tell me that Matthew Stafford is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton, yet statistically their numbers aren't that far off. Andy Dalton has as many playoff wins as Matthew Stafford and twice as many playoff appearances as Matthew Stafford. Okay? Matthew Stafford has never won a playoff game, yet I'm told he's better than Andy Dalton. Okay? Now that that's been established, let's talk a little bit about Detroit. First of all, they are projecting that Matt Patricia's on the hot seat. This is why the NFL is dying. Because coaches aren't given any time to grow and get their system going. Bad teams are bad permanently, and they're bad for good reason. Right? Could you imagine the Patriots firing Bill Belichick after the 2000 season? After a miserable 99 and a miserable 2000? Could you imagine? It blows my mind that Patricia's on the hot seat after one season, and considering how well the Lions played the last 5 weeks of the season last year, and I don't care about their wins. They played a lot better against the Rams. They beat Arizona. They played well defensively against Buffalo. Yeah, they look like crap against Minnesota, but they blew the doors off of Green Bay. And the week before the Rams was the Thanksgiving game that they played pretty well against Chicago. And yes, I know Chicago had a backup quarterback, but still, the Lions played a lot better against the Bears than the Rams did. Right? And that was with their backup in. And I'm sorry, but they didn't have backups on defense, and they still put up 16 points. So for me, the Lions are one of those teams, again, they're an under-the-radar team. I don't think Minnesota is going to be particularly well. The shine has kind of wore off a little bit for me on Kirk Cousins, in the sense that, Cousins was in a situation that was primed for him to win. And he didn't in Minnesota this year. And he fell horrifically short. And I told you, I'm not about saying I'm above saying I'm wrong when I'm wrong. Okay, I was high on on Cousins for a long time. Not high on him anymore. I don't think he's nearly as good as I was seeing on film. I think in the right system he could be an effective quarterback, but he can't be the reason you're winning and you're trying to win a football game. Hold on, I got this stupid alarm clock going off, and then we'll talk. Come on. Sorry, guys. The pains of being indoors. So what I do want to talk a little bit about is, you talked about Kenny Galladay, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit. Galladay and the offense is really where I'm going to kind of turn my attention to before I get to defense. I swear it's the longest chimes ever. Okay. Offensively, the Lions are going to run the football. I don't know how, everyone's, Matthew Stafford doesn't hand the ball off. Well, then the Lions aren't going to make the playoffs again. And the Lions won't be over 500 again if they turn around and they don't run the football. They don't run the football, they're going to be 6-10, 5-11 all over again. And I'm sorry, but I think the Lions have more invested at this point in their head coach than they do in their starting quarterback. I don't care what the financial situation is. They need Patricia to work out. And you're not going to fire a coach without giving him the full opportunity to be successful. It's the same reason the Cardinals were allowed to draft Murray in the first round and trade their quarterback for their new head coach. Not saying the Lions are ever going to trade Stafford, but they may turn around and tell Matthew, your record when you don't hand the ball off is pathetically terrible. You make Kirk Cousins look like a Hall of Fame quarterback, so you're handing the ball off, Matt. Sorry. That's the way it's going to go down. So I think Kerryon Johnson is going to rush for 1,000 yards, and I think that's going to change a lot of elements. Okay? Kenny Galladay, for me, is an X factor. I don't know how good Galladay is. I know how good Galladay is when he's being targeted over 100 times, right? How good is Galladay when he's getting targeted 90 times, 85 times in the season? Is he still going to put up 1,000 yards? Is he still going to catch over 60 receptions? Now, I like the pickup in Hawkinson. I think that's going to open up the passing game with the play action with Kerryon Johnson. C.J. Anderson in the red zone, I agree with you. To me, the Danny Amendola pick is going to take some time away, going to take some options away from Kenny Galladay. The running the ball is going to take some options away from Kenny Galladay. They address their offensive line, but to me, the two big moves for me was defensive end Dre Flowers from New England, who proved he was a very good ball player, but also Jelani Taiavia. I can't even say his name. I think it's Taiavia or Taivi, whatever. The kid from Hawaii, the linebacker. Guys, you want to know what Levon Kirkland looked like and played like in the 1990s? Go ahead and watch some Lions games. This guy is going to be a tackling machine against the run. He's going to be vulnerable against the pass. So what they may do is just sit him in the zone and say, okay, nothing over the middle or knock it away, because he does have some athletic ability. But he is going to open up everything for that Lions defense, because now they've got a middle linebacker. Even if he does play outside linebacker, they've got an edge setter. He can play both outside and middle. He can set the table in the middle. He can set the edge if he needs to against the run. That's going to open up more opportunities, I think, for Darius Slay and for Quandre Diggs from Texas, who I think is going to now not have to play so much in the box and could actually play some more true safety. And when he does come in the box, it's an added threat against the run. I think the Lions have really made some nice moves in improving their football team. Now, when I look at their schedule, I think beating Arizona is likely. I only pick them against the Chargers because they're home and Matthew Stafford can win a shootout. The question is, will the Chargers let it be a shootout? I think the Chargers are going to be a good football team, but if this game was in LA, I know the Chargers had a good road record last year. If this game was in LA, I would be more inclined to give the edge to the Chargers. I'm giving the edge to New England or to Detroit here. At Philly, I think the Eagles are a much better football team all the way around. I think the Eagles are going to handle business. Home against Kansas City. Again, there's film on this guy. We'll see what happens. But if I'm going to put things in a capsule based on last year, based on the Lions' talent, I'm going Kansas City in that game, even though they're home, because the Chargers do have some extra dynamics to play with. Although without Tyreek Hill, it's going to have to be the Travis Kelce show, or the Lions could very easily be 3-1. That's a swing game for me. Coming out of the bye week, Green Bay, no problem, Monday night blowout. Minnesota, no problem. Giants at home, I go with the Lions. So now you're looking at, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 2, maybe 6 and 1, but that's where the wheels come off. They got to go to Oakland. I think the Raiders are improved. I think Antonio Brown is more than capable of taking the top off of the defense. I think the Raiders are going to have a better year this year than people think. I'm going to go with the Raiders at home. Then they go to Chicago. I'm picking the Bears. Then they got Dallas. I'm picking Dallas, even though it's in Detroit. The Lions horrendously struggle against the Dallas Cowboys. At Washington, the Lions have only won twice in their history at Washington. Okay? This may be the third time, though, because I don't see anything from Washington that resembles an NFL franchise. So they'll win that one. That's 6 wins. They go to Chicago. I don't see them winning that game either. At Minnesota.
No, that's Thanksgiving Day.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're home. Thanksgiving again for the second year in a row. I still don't see them beating the Bears, though, at all. At Minnesota, I don't see them winning that game. But the last 3 games, I think, are all wins. Tampa Bay, Denver, and Green Bay. So 9-7, 10-6. Depending on how they do against Kansas City, they could be 8-8. They could be 9-7. They could be 10-6. I think that part of the schedule, Oakland, Chicago, Dallas, Washington, you could sandwich a win in there. Chicago and Minnesota, I just think those are really tough games. Tampa Bay won't be a problem. Denver, I think, is going to be, at that point, their season is going to be over. They're going to pack it in, even though it's in Mile High. And Green Bay, I just think, is a joke in 2019. I really do. I think you're starting to see, you're going to see like the 86 Packers this year. Aaron Rodgers has proven last year that he can no longer win games by himself. So I think Green Bay's in real trouble. But I think Detroit could have a strong year. Like I said, 8-8 to 10-6. I could see anything in between there. What's your take, E? Am I crazy?
Yeah, the Lions to me are a mystery team. I mean, typically you hear Detroit Lions, you're like, oh, well, they're just going to be mediocre again. I think they have a chance to make noise, but it is the Lions, and unfortunately, I always say that, and they tend to always re-middle the pack somewhere. So,
I do want to say one other thing. I do want to say one thing. Forever. I'm not saying the Chargers can't win that game. I want to say this to you specifically because I don't want you rolling your eyes. Let me rephrase that. I could see the Lions going 7-9 to 10-6 because I think that Charger game is also a toss-up game, and I think the Chargers are more than capable of beating Detroit in Detroit. So, I don't know. Really, they're after Arizona, all three of those games, in my opinion, are swing games. San Diego, Philadelphia, Kansas City, they're all in that swing category. So we'll see what happens. But I do want to make sure I'm clear that I think the Chargers are a better team than the Lions, and B, more than capable of beating Detroit in Detroit. If that game was in LA, I wouldn't even say it's a swing game. I'd say Chargers should win that one running away. Just being in Detroit, where the Lions tend to play better football, and that defense is going to be a little better than last year, I think that's a tougher game. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, sorry, E. Go ahead.
No worries. Again, like with the Lions, I'm looking forward to seeing them on Thanksgiving again this year against the Bears. Some of the best Thanksgiving Day games are between those two teams, and we'll see if they can finish anywhere between first and fourth, to be honest. And I know you mentioned Green Bay, being the 86 Packers. A lot of us can only hope.
Well, yeah. Look, I just what's Green Bay done that's really impressed anybody? I mean, we'll do our mid-season, our preseason before the season starts prediction show like we always do, but I mean, I look at Green Bay and I laugh at the roster. I really do. Darius Smith is a good pickup, but Adrian Amos, Jawal Davis, Sam Ficken, Preston Smith, Billy Turner, those are their additions. They lost Clay Matthews. They lost Byron Bell. They lost Kentrell Bryce, Antonio Morrison, Nick Perry, who I don't even think were necessarily good players, but they were certainly better than what's replacing them. Now, we'll see, but I'm also not a fan of their coach. I mean, if you couldn't win in Miami when you had all the money and all the opportunity, I don't care that you were a great offensive coordinator. So was Lindy Infante, and his best record as an NFL head coach was 10-6. So, color me stupid, but I'm sorry. I'm not afraid of Green Bay. I'm actually pissed that the Rams don't play the Packers this year because I think it would be a 34-7 shellacking, if not better. But needless to say, Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to say, oh, I played the Rams really tough last year and the Rams were afraid of us. No, we're not. I could play you 16 times this year and go undefeated. And it wouldn't even be close. I think maybe one or two of the games might be close. So the Bears should have no problem with Green Bay this year either. And the more I look at their roster, I'm just like, ooh, they are old and bad. That's no way to go through life. Fat and slow and stupid is no way to go through life when you're a football player. So, anyway, that's it for the show. Eric, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, the 85 Bears would beat the 99 Rams in Chicago 21-20. Sorry.
Oh, you're gonna go with that, huh? It'd be a fun game. I agree. I think it would be. I said 20-17, but I think it would be a close game. I really do. Both those teams had opportunities, but I just think the Rams had a little bit more to offer on defense than the Bears had on offense. But that Bear defense was something else. All right. Well, that's it. I'm Anthony.
I'm Eric.
Go Rams!
And go Bears.
Horns up.
Bear down.
See you guys next week or in 2 weeks.